Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Food Origins Podcast. This is episode 50. Super excited for this one. I got an awesome guest for you. But first order of business to let you know this podcast is sponsored by Firecracker Farm out of Florida. They make awesome hot pepper infused salt. And if you guys are watching this, I'm holding the brick grinder that's got the three kings in it with ghost pepper, scorpion, and reaper. Really awesome stuff. You guys have been seeing me cook with it quite a bit over the last year, and then now they sponsor the podcast. There's a discount code for 10% off on their website, firecracker.farm. Use code FoodOriginsPodC, and you get to see everything that's there. I'll show you the main push grinder that you'll find on the website. It's really handy to use on just about everything. I've been using it for eggs. I use it on steak. I've used it on vegetables, a lot of different things. And I've also been writing some recipes on their website, so you'll be able to check that out as well. Appreciate Firecracker Farm for sponsoring the podcast. Thank you, Alex. Really excited for this episode. The guest today is, if you haven't noticed, I don't always wear somebody else's merch, but of course I'm wearing the Boarman. Danny Bolton is my guest today on the podcast. Really excited to have him on. So awesome to have him on talking about all the things he does. If you haven't heard of him, he's been on MeatEater and a bunch of other hunting and outdoor fishing shows. We got to go into his childhood, growing up in Hawaii, then coming out to the mainland, and then getting into some of his hunting adventures, cooking adventures, fishing, of course. We got into some recipes, kind of the joy of cooking. I think we have a mutual understanding of that, of what it's like to cook for others, and see them pretty happy about it, and just kind of that enjoyment that you get when someone gets to taste your food, especially for someone like Danny who goes out and gets it, brings it back, breaks it all down, and then cooks it for you. So really awesome to have Danny on. Thank you for being on. Really, guys, enjoy this episode, and thanks for listening. Welcome to another episode of the Food Origins Podcast. Today, my guest is Danny Bolton, aka the Boarman. I really like to read your friend, it's probably your producer and friend Caleb's description of you that you have on your bio.
Yeah.
I got to read that for you. Just meet Danny Bolton, a man who has lived 9 lives, not because he has cheated death, although that is true with various shark encounters and high-speed accidents, but more his knowledge and expertise in so many different areas. You rarely meet someone who trains active military in off-road handling skills, takes celebrity chefs hunting, knows how to roast coffee, and can hold his breath for 4 minutes. I can honestly say there is nobody like Danny Bolton. And that's from Caleb Marmolejo, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Caleb's a stud. Shout out to Caleb.
Yep. Yeah. So I appreciate you coming on. I mean, you do have a varied skill set, which is awesome. I think everyone appreciates that and sees what you do. Just kind of take us back. And, I usually ask people, what was it like growing up? And then we also obviously want to hear your food adventures. So what was it like growing up as a kid, and what'd you eat growing up?
Yeah. Growing up was good. It was here in Hawaii. I was born and raised here in Kona. So pretty much living in the same town that I was raised in, and pretty simple life. Got 2 sisters, and my dad works construction. So I believe when I was probably younger, he was working for quite a bit of other people, but from what I can remember, he had his own company from, ever since my memory started. So started his own construction company, framing houses. And he was awesome dad. Was definitely at work a lot, so I didn't see him. So seeing him at nights and stuff, and we would do cool trips. But as far as our general day to day, my mom would handle, taking us to school and picking us up or taking us wherever we needed to go. And kind of just had a lot of free time to ourselves, drop us off at home and go figure it out. So I'd go run around in the woods and shoot my little pellet gun and, figure out what I could do, and started skateboarding and doing other things. But yeah, growing up here was awesome. Such a beautiful place to live. And I didn't realize how good it was until I moved away. And then when I had a kid and I had my daughter, I realized like this is the place I want her to grow up. So that's what really brought me back.
And what'd you eat growing up?
Not like, bro, we ate pretty simple, but honestly, I don't want to like call out my mom, but straight up, like never ate super healthy. Um, she's her ethnicity is like half Japanese. So my grandma's full Japanese, and then my grandpa is Native American and Mexican slash Spanish. Like I think he's from Mexico, but kind of that blue eyed, blonde hair Spanish.
Okay.
Um, but they grew up in the desert in Cali. They grew up like in Bakersfield and Mojave and Cal City, like full desert rats out there. And she comes from a big family, and they kind of had to fend for themselves too. So they, it's not like I had like this crazy Asian inspired mom that was cooking all this Asian food like that. It was more just like enchiladas and man, she cooks amazing falatas, which are chicken falatas, which are so good, like fried. She bakes them now to make them a little bit more healthy, but straight up, like I don't know if I drank much water when I was a kid. It was just like sodas and lots of cereal, eating lots of cereal, and pretty much never even cooked for myself till I was older. Just a bunch of junk food, and can't even remember, like just whatever was ready in the fridge or packaged already. Just grab that baby, and whatever had lots of sugar in it.
Yeah, like whatever snack was in the cupboard, right? Just take it
100%.
down. Yeah. I
Yep.
mean, I think me and my brother, same thing. Like we're guilty of all that stuff. Like we just, my mom grabs snacks, whether it's chips, cookies, you name it, grab it and go, because we're, like a lot of kids come home from school, want to go play outside, go play strikeouts with your buddies or go ride the bike, whatever. And then it's like,
Mm-hmm.
just, oh, I need a snack before dinner. And it's like, don't eat too much before dinner. Otherwise you're not going to eat
Yeah.
dinner. Well, all that story, but yeah. And so were you already kind of doing a ton of different activities as a kid? I mean, obviously you're outdoors, especially being in Hawaii. It's pretty
Mm-hmm.
much, an outdoor lifestyle. How did that start? Because, a lot of people see your skill set and we just kind of want to see how you built that up over time. Um,
Um,
did it start pretty early getting into the stuff that you do now?
yeah. Um, Thinking about it, yes, it didn't feel that way, right? Like you don't keep track when you're young, or even me now. I don't think anything I do is special. It just happens. But um, funny enough, because a lot of people know me for like the hunting stuff, but I didn't really start hunting till I was older, till I was like pretty much 30 years old.
Hmm.
But I did grow up shooting pellet guns, and then eventually graduated to having a 22 caliber when I was young. So like my dad had an old pellet gun, and I had open range with that thing, so I could go around, just shoot whatever rocks and trees, and then started shooting like little birds and stuff. And it was funny. It was like if you kill it, you eat it. So I was like getting these little doves, stripping these little breasts out of them, and not even knowing how to cook, but like microwaving these little dove breasts with like, we had some like, I can remember one time I used this blackening seasoning that we had in the drawer for like making blackened ahi, and I just put some of that on there, microwave that baby up till it was like chewy and white. But definitely shot a lot. when I was real young. And then just that would give me an excuse to be outside. I would just go run around outside, and the little pellet gun was coming with me. Then I would say the first real thing that gave me a sense of freedom was a skateboard. So at 10 years old, I had my neighborhood friend. At that time, we were living in like a little bit of a neighborhood. We moved around a lot, and my closest friend that I had at that time, Ben, he started skateboarding. He was older than me. He was probably 13. And
Mm-hmm.
he's like, dude, you got to get a skateboard so we can go skate in the neighborhood and stuff. And I was like, yeah, okay, cool. So my dad, I begged my parents. I'm pretty sure my dad took me to Walmart. We had a Walmart. It must have been brand new at that time because like our town just got one. And it was a cheap Walmart skateboard that was like super thick, weird wheels on it, and it didn't even have real grip tape. It had like sand that was like glued to the deck. That thing was so weird, but it was a start. And I remember like, okay, I got to figure out how to roll around on this thing and figure it out so that I could ask for like a real one, like earn trying to get a real one. So yeah, skateboarding, that's what kind of opened up my eyes to the world because I'd get dropped off in town and get a skateboard with all my friends, but we were getting to go out and do all kinds of stuff. We were just getting into trouble, and um, it just opened up my eyes to like how things truly are. I guess not that I didn't know that before, but you're hanging out with homeless people, you're seeing the riffraff that's in the streets, you're seeing drug deals go on, you're getting kicked out of places, and you're getting to experience that with friends too that are all kind of just like any kids who's getting dropped off in town. Well, I guess maybe not so much at that time, but maybe sort of more so now is like their parents giving them that sense of freedom, but
Yeah.
it's good, but it's also just a, uh, I wouldn't say a lack of parenting, but it's like, here, you just go figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but that eventually like that excitement and that, you know, what you would call action sports, because like skateboarding falls in that category. That sense of adrenaline that you get from skateboarding and working hard for something to accomplish it, even though, you may fall 99% of the time, but then succeed that one time. That's all it took to feel accomplished. That kind of transitioned over into, oh, like I want to try BMX. I want to ride BMX, or I want to ride dirt bikes. Like we had a family friend gave us a little dirt bike. So I started on a 50. And I would say a lot of my action sports stuff came from those early teenage years, from 10 years old up until, high school. I was trying everything I could. Funny enough, though, other than surfing, I kind of stayed away from because it was too boring for me. Like I remember I have a bunch of friends who surf and they rip, and I would go film them, and then they'd film me skate, and they'd try to get me out, and I hate waiting for waves. I hate waiting for other people. I just wanted to skate all the time or do something I could do and not wait for the right waves to come. That wasn't until later. And then the skill set stuff, I think construction has a big part to do with it. Like growing up in a family that does construction, you kind of have to figure stuff out. There's so much moving parts with it. So I would say a combination of all those things kind of like started leading me down that road to learn, all the skill sets that I have.
Yeah, and then also we got to throw in there the coffee. Can
Mm.
you explain how that it's your family as a Kona coffee and tea, right?
Yes. Yeah. So a lot of those skill sets are kind of just out of like, yeah, my family's given me that opportunity, like my dad, we had this piece of property that he bought way up in the mountains that was a ranch that got split up into a bunch of smaller parcels. And he bought like almost the top one because it was the cheapest one because it's hardest to get to. It literally took like 2 hours on a dirt road to get up there at that time. Now it's got a nice paved road up there. It takes 10, 15 minutes. But one of the years, from my understanding, the construction was a little slow, and he didn't want to let go of any of his guys. So he was like, "Hey, let's go plant some coffee up at the farm because I know some other people have some farms and they seem to be somewhat successful at it, you know." And Kona coffee, it's like the Napa wine region. So it's just this region you can grow coffee.
Yeah.
So we planted, like, I got put on the task of planting all the little coffee trees at our house because you plant them down where you can kind of control the environment and have running water and stuff. And so we would take these little coffee sprouts and put them in a pot about 10 inches high and 6 inches around, and you'd fill that pot with dirt, kind of like sort the dirt out, poke a hole in it, plant this little coffee plant in there, and then stack it up. And we would fill, I mean, I remember sitting there by myself just like stacking these things up and like watching that row grow. But at the end of when you're planting the whole thing, there was probably like a 3,000 square foot greenhouse that was covered in these little pots on the ground, and then put the irrigation in there and let them kind of grow. But through the whole process of the coffee company growing, I've learned all the different processes, and that was kind of just out of one, like, forced labor. But then as we got older, it was a job for me to do, to learn how to mill coffee, to learn how to roast coffee. When I would be packaging it, I'd go in there after school and stuff, and that was my first like real paying job. I'd make like $6 an hour, I think. So I could just go in there anytime I want, package coffee. And the guy who roasted coffee would be right outside. So sometimes I'd watch him how to do it, and he'd explain it to me. And then I got old enough to where I was doing it for a while for a company or just helping. I'd help a lot during the holidays because it gets real busy, right? Like all the gifts.
Yeah.
So I would help roast extra batches during the holidays, and things like that, just opportunities that I've kind of been forced into. But also part of it is, I guess, I've probably have ADHD. I've never been like diagnosed with it, but I also just get real bored and stagnant at one thing. So if an opportunity comes to do some other type of work, and I usually like, oh, what's that shiny object over there? Like, let's go chase that for a little bit. So I've worked as a land, surveyor. I worked under a surveyor for a long time. You can get outside and just, hike around. And then that was decent money when I was younger, and we learned how to weld. Me and my cousins kind of just learned on our own and went down that rabbit hole of like how to weld. And we wanted to fabricate trucks and stuff, and just all those things. It's never like, nothing seems impossible to me. And if I don't have enough money to get into that thing, I'll either find a way to do it, find somebody who does have enough money, or go get a job doing it and learn how to do that. And I kind of go through that cycle throughout my whole life, is just like trying to figure out a way. And it just, nothing seems out of reach for me. It's just like, it's not even a challenge to think about how to get something. It's more just like, okay, with time, it'll come. I just got to keep that desire for learning that one thing, there, so that when the opportunity's there, I can jump on it.
Yeah. And then you just kind of stack it little by little every day.
Yeah.
And then till you get better at it.
Yeah. I mean, if anybody was like, oh man, I'd love to start, learning all that stuff, it's awesome. You just have to start today. Because for me, I've been doing it since I was, 6 years old. So we're in it for 30 plus years already.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then, I've got to ask you about some of the coffee.
Yeah,
I didn't, I don't know about you, but I didn't taste coffee. I tasted it when I was little, hated it. And then started to appreciate it when I got older and started doing, shift work where I'm working every, I worked, in the department I worked every shift there is. So like midnights, whatever. And then I started drinking coffee and my dad was like, "Oh, you drink coffee now?" I was like, "Yeah, I do." I didn't
Yeah.
like it before, I do now. So, I want to ask you about the coffee. Obviously, you've been through the processes. I've interviewed actually a couple that owns a Peruvian coffee company out here,
Hmm.
and his farm is out in Peru. Um, what is your favorite roast? How did did you like it at first, or I'm sure you got to taste it really early on, and then
Yeah.
tell us what your favorite roasts are and stuff.
Yeah. So my favorite roast is a medium roast, and it's the like light roast sometimes is a little too earthy for me. Like you can still kind of taste some of that bean, like earthy flavor. And excuse me for not using like all these perfect words on what their notes are, but I'm not like that. Like I'll tell you how it is, like straight up. And the dark roast sometimes a little too bold, a little too much of that roasted coffee flavor. I wouldn't say burnt, but just medium roast is like that perfect mix where that bean is fully roasted all the way through, and it's got like this chocolatey smell to it. But I didn't. I tried coffee when I was younger, and I didn't really like it. I was like, this stuff sucks.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
then we were. I was actually living so out of high school. I moved to the mainland, and then I was I was back visiting for something, and I was in between jobs, and there was an opportunity. We had a coffee shop at that point, and there was an opportunity to help manage it and run it because there was a kind of a gap in that time with management. So my wife and I jumped in to help out the family and manage this coffee shop that we had. And so we're showing up at 4:30 in the morning to open up, and then that's when I started drinking coffee. He'd be there getting everything ready, brewing pots of coffee, getting the espresso machine ready, getting pastries ready. And when I was there early in the morning, and you're like, you smell it, and you're like, dang, I just need something to keep me going. And so that's when I started drinking coffee. And sadly, it was our coffee, which is pretty good. And I got used to like drinking some pretty good coffee. So now when I go and I have coffee elsewhere, it's hard to appreciate, other coffees. Just because Kona coffee. So I would say it's just different. There's other coffees. I'm not saying they're bad. They're just different, but ours is very smooth. And I mean, that's the easiest way to put it. Like there's some other ones that are pretty bitter, or they're, they roasted them too long. A lot of it has to come with the roast too. But yeah, Kona coffee is amazing. The little backstory on that, my parents planted that farm, and 20 acres, started with 20 acres. So we planted all those little trees. They grew up 1 year at the nursery. Then we took them up to the farm and planted them. And then I think 2 years later is when they first started having their coffee beans, and you can harvest it.
Yeah, the fruit.
Within about the first 2 years, that coffee won at a coffee festival. The first year they ever entered it, it won best coffee in Kona.
Wow.
So, and it's really unique where the farm is. It's a lot higher elevation than most farms. And so my dad was like, oh, I guess we got something here. And a lot of it has to do with the soil. So like maybe that area has really good soil too. And it was just higher elevation, and it's just something different. So that's what sent him down the path of need to build this coffee company out to like a full on deal. At first it was just a farm. It was no shop, no mill, no roaster, none of that. So yeah, definitely got used to drinking some pretty good stuff, and it's hard for me to drink other stuff. And that medium roast is for me. Like if I'm giving someone a bad coffee, I start with the medium roast, and then they can kind of choose from there. no hate for anybody who wants dark or light. You know, everybody's got their own personal palate on what they like. And honestly, I'm pretty horrible at being able to taste all the different notes. Like my palate's pretty plain compared to like my daughter can pick up stuff that's in food that I don't even know what she's talking about sometimes. So, um, but yeah, uh,
Yeah.
coffee's the bomb, dude. And it's a cool process to see the whole thing.
Hmm. Yeah. To understand, like, I think some people that drink a lot of it forget like how much it takes to get to that point where you get to brew it right in front of you. So yeah, no, I appreciate you sharing that, and that's awesome. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, to have that premium, and then you realize how premium it is. You're like, oh, it's the top of the line, and
Yeah.
that's yeah,
And
it's pretty
I will
awesome.
say something too, like because I'm a cheapo myself, and like I hear people complain about the price of Kona coffee.
Yeah,
Whereas you're right, it is expensive, but there's a ton of work that goes into it. And what I will say is, driving up to my parents' place, there's this used to be this beautiful farm, like gorgeous, one of the best manicured farms, gorgeous trees, well established. You know, just the cost of things, they got pushed out, and you drive by it now, it's just all weeds, and the coffee trees are all bent over, and there's weeds growing over them. So, um, you know, to stand up for people who are like, oh, it's too expensive. Okay, that's fine. You just need to, you know, go buy somewhere else then. But if they don't support these people, they're eventually just not going to have that coffee's not going to be around. You know, it's not affordable to be able to maintain that business.
yeah, 100%. And it's like with small farms too. I just got through talking to somebody with a small farm, small cattle farm. He's like, you just got to support us because we want to be here as long as we can possibly can, and so to keep doing that, keep things running. Need everybody's support for sure. Um, Going into, I know like you've tons of hunting, tons of fishing, so I definitely want to get into that.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people know you from MeatEater, and also you got to take Chef Gordon Ramsay out, which was awesome. See,
Yeah.
what are I've got to ask you, like, what are some of your favorite meals out of, there's a ton of hunts and a ton of fishing, but let's start off with hunting. Do you have some favorite meals that you've done either out there or come back home and you're like, oh man, this is epic?
Yeah. I have a good one, and it's kind of simple on the cooking side, but it's a good story. Is um, last year I took my daughter on our first deer hunt. So went to the mainland and hunted mule deer, and was able to get she was able to get one. And I guess stepping back a little bit, I'm gonna tell this other story real quick. Is just when I started letting her shoot a bow. Kids are kind of like kids are killers, dude. You give a kid a squirt gun or something, he wants to shoot it at something, right? And
Yep.
then you give a kid a bow or a pellet gun, they want to kill something. Like, it is what it is. Like, I'm gonna tell you, you give it to any kid, and they're just like, oh, let me shoot it at something. So I had to tame my
Yeah.
daughter down. I'm like, hey, you're not shooting this bow at anything, like, because if you do, you're gonna injure it, and then it's not gonna. And they get that, but you need to kind of like tell, like, make them remember that. And I wanted her to get really good at it before she tried to shoot anything, because I wanted her to be successful, and I wanted her not to live with that guilt of injuring an animal and not getting it. And then she finally was like, Dad, I really want to go pig hunting. I was like, okay. This was before Thanksgiving a couple years ago. I was like, okay, you got to shoot your bow every day. I got to go to work. I was going on a trip for work, and you shoot your bow every day, and you start shooting good, which she already was. Um, then I'll take you before Thanksgiving. We'll hopefully get a pig, and we'll use some of that meat to cook it for the family. Because I wanted her to already have a plan on why she was hunting. Like,
Right.
it's not just to kill that thing. It's like, what are we gonna do with that animal? Why are we killing this, and what are we gonna do with the meat? So she was able to be successful. We made some food, but later on too, I took her on her first rifle hunt because that was a bow hunt. We got this deer, and we were able to come back from the mainland with all this deer meat. And not the day that we got back, but the next day, I invited all my family over and a bunch of friends. So we probably had 50 people over at my house, and we made just simple deer burgers. And I have a hand grinder, so hand grind them that night, and just salt, pepper, garlic powder. I cut onions pretty small and put them in there, and then no fat. We didn't add any fat, and I think I probably just did those on the Traeger. So we made up all these deer burgers, had all these people over, and my daughter was able to be the one that supplied that, and I got to see her communicating with people and them congratulating her, but then her also accepting that and being able to tell those stories on where the meat came from. And that to me was pretty special, just seeing that whole process.
Yeah, I think that's an awesome like full circle moment for you too, right? To kind of share your passion and your skill and to have put it in instill it in her, and then it gets back to the people. And then the best thing I like about cooking for others is getting that, that happy satisfaction of tasting what someone provided for you. And I love that. It's awesome.
Yeah, it is like so simple, right? And it's a feeling you can't explain, just being able to cook for other people. And yeah, it's just satisfying and good. And it's like the world is perfect because it just, that's what we need to be doing. And the fact that our brains are rewarding us for that, it just makes you want to do it again.
Hmm. Yeah, and it's also like I don't know if you find it therapeutic, but I find it kind of therapeutic as well. Kind of especially with like a lot of especially like shooting your bow, which I do as much as I can. It's very zen. Like it's just
Mm-hmm.
that closing off all the other things going on in your head and just stopping for a moment and saying, "All right, let's make this cool meal for some friends or whatever," and taking a recipe you never tried before, that kind of thing. What about so that's hunting. What about fishing? I know there's a ton of recipes. Everyone's asking me like, "Oh, you got to ask him, what's his favorite?" And I've seen, of course, the poke is
Yeah.
obviously probably comes top of the list, but you got some recipes and stuff that you like to make with fish.
Yeah. I'll just give you a couple. Like my favorite right now is carpaccio. So
Mm.
just mainly you could do it with ahi too, but if I'm doing ahi, it's just probably sashimi, just soy sauce and wasabi. But ono or refish and just cutting that thin like sashimi, but laying it out so that most of it is exposed on a plate, and then going with oil over it, either just olive oil or avocado oil, usually olive oil, and salt, pepper. I found that you do have to be pretty healthy on the salt because sashimi, you got the soy sauce that's getting that salt. Poke, you got the soy sauce that's giving it that salt. Sometimes I even add a little bit more. Um, when you got this carpaccio, you're not putting soy sauce on it, and you definitely have to salt it. You can't lightly, if you don't not over salt it, but if you don't properly salt it, it just doesn't give it that zing that you need.
Mm-hmm.
And then um, onions and cilantro over the top of that, and then lemon. Um, if you're gonna put the lemon, which you do got to put the lemon, but you got to put it kind of like not, don't wait too long after you put the lemon, or else you're gonna end up with ceviche basically.
Yeah, it kind of
But
cooks. People don't
yeah, you don't
realize
want
it
it
does
cooked.
cooks it. Yeah.
Yep. I feel like I'm leaving something out for the carpaccio, but uh, that's probably my favorite right now on how to try it out and eat it. Um, just just different, like grew up eating sashimi and poke for a long time, so then the carpaccio is just kind of something different. And fine till later in my life, and
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
it's been good. And then just like Usually my go-to if we're hungry and kind of in a hurry and I'm not don't got anything fancy in my mind is just salt, pepper, garlic powder, and cook it in butter, and just don't overcook it. Usually I just throw it in the skillet and cook the one side to where you can see like the whiteness of it getting cooked coming up around the corners. And then I flip it and I start cooking that other side, and I wait till that whiteness kind of covers the whole, surrounds the whole thing to where the outsides I know are cooked and the inside probably needs a little bit more time. And usually I just turn the oven off, or the, not the oven, but the stovetop. I just turn it off, and we have a gas stovetop, so it still kind of stays warm for a while. And usually it just finishes cooking in there, and then I can like not time it exactly perfect with all my sides, because then I can just like leave that, know that that's going to finish cooking, and I can go get all my sides ready, and then it's juicy and not overcooked. It's easy to dry fish out.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are intimidated by cooking fish sometimes. Like if it sticks too much to the pan,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times people don't realize if you just leave it, like it will unstick itself eventually.
Oh yeah,
Um, you know,
yeah. Butter's a little hard because like, so you got to get that. Yeah, like to what he's talking to you, like get the pan hot first. So if you're cooking in oil, oil's a little easier. Avocado oil doesn't burn as much, but like butter, it starts to smoke a lot. But you want to get that baby to that butter is like smoking, at least for me. You don't want the butter to turn brown, but you want it like hot.
yep.
And then drop that fish in there where it's already sizzling. Don't put it in there when the pan's kind of cold. And
Yeah.
so, and then you got to let it cook, because then it's got to build that crust on the bottom and not stick, and just leave it alone. You should only flip it once. Um, so you crust up the one side and then get that spatula and scoop underneath that baby. Like, don't be afraid to be quick and like forceful. Just slip that baby underneath there and flip it, and then let that side cook. And like I said, I just flip that once and then just let it sit, and it shouldn't stick unless your pan sucks. But even mine are not non-stick. Mine are just stainless. So
Yeah. I use cast iron too.
cast iron's good. Yeah.
Yeah. So those recipes, I've got to ask you, being outdoors on either a fishing trip or a hunting trip, what have you had to do to like kind of makeshift some cooking? You're like, oh, I usually have,
Yeah.
like somebody forgot the grill or someone forgot the stove. Now we got to make a meal with whatever we got out there. Do you have something where fun where you had to makeshift a
Yeah.
meal
Yeah. I
for
got a
some
couple
people?
fun ones. Got a couple fun ones for my bachelor party, for my wedding when I got married. I'm not like a big like typical bachelor party, I'll just say, and I don't drink or anything, but we're down to get after it, you know. And I wanted to go camp at this beach that we grew up driving down to and camping at, but they turned it into a state park, so they locked the gates and you can't go down there anymore.
Mm,
But at that time, every Wednesday it was closed because we had like government furlough. So like they'd shut all the parks down because the government workers wouldn't work on one day a week. So I was like, hey, let's go down there. Let's take the boat down and we'll go down and we'll camp at that beach. And then we'll be out of there in the morning before anybody shows up, you know. Went down and caught some like lobster dive, because we got there kind of late. We fished in the afternoon off the boat and then showed up to the beach and found a mooring and swam to shore and caught a couple lobsters, crabs, and we shot some fish and we had some fish that we caught too, and then realized I left it all up to here's the funny thing is I left everything up to my friends. I was like, hey, I don't want to, you guys figure it all out, because it's like my wedding, dude. You guys
yeah.
figure it all out, and like all the food, all that stuff, and bring me some stuff to sleep too, you know, like, because I was running wild getting our wedding stuff ready, and then I had to take
Right.
some friends. I fished that day with family, and then I came in and picked all the boys up, and we went back out. So, oh yeah, we got it all, we got everything. My friends are not the best planners, and we're just down
Yeah.
to rough it too. So like We show up. I got no blankets, nowhere, nothing to sleep on. So like, I ended up snuggling up with one of my friends in his blanket, and my one friend's in like this inflatable pool that they got because we like used it to tow behind the boat as like a floaty, you know.
Yeah.
He's crashed out in that, but we went to go cook this fish and this crab and some of these lobsters. Nothing like, right, like no grill, could just throw them in the fire. But we ended up going up to the public state bathrooms up there, and they have the showers, and the shower has like a grate on the bottom, that so we pulled this grate off and like brought that down to the beach, cooked off all the crusties off it, like scraped it all off, you know.
Yeah.
Got the lobsters and stuff on there, and no seasoning. um but I was able to make like a nice little grill and eat everything off of that. And then that's pretty classic. But the other thing I was thinking of is I shot this elk a couple years ago, and I instantly had to go into some of the work where we're training some guys. So I
Hmm.
dropped off all the meat at a processor. Usually I like to process it myself, but this one I had no time, so I just dropped it off. But I had the heart that I brought with me on the trip, and we ended up out there, had no oil or grease, so we ended up we had bacon, so we cooked up some bacon, so we got some grease. And then I found some, I don't I think it was chicken in a basket, the crackers, right? Is that
Oh
the right
yeah.
name? Chicken
Yeah.
in a biscuit or something?
Biscuit, chicken and a biscuit. Yeah.
Yeah, so got some of those crackers and crunched them all up, and I breaded this elk heart with those crackers, and then fried it in bacon grease, and then served it to all the boys. Oh, that turned out pretty good. Honestly, I'd eat that again.
That sounds pretty good. And I also saw you do it with kind of going with that theme of crust, is you did it with grouse with Ritz crackers.
Yep. Yeah,
Yeah.
the Ritz is kind of a classic. When we used to fish when I was a kid, any of the reef fish we used to catch, my dad would bread them in Ritz, and then we'd cook them. And so, yeah, we were on that moose hunt. We're looking for stuff to cook up that grouse, and did it in, that was probably bacon grease too. The bacon
Yeah. I
grease,
mean,
yeah,
it's
so good.
money. It's
Yeah,
money. Yeah.
dude, that grouse turned out good. I wasn't expecting it to be so juicy.
Yeah. And it's I mean, how do you describe that to people? I mean, what that tastes like. What does the heart taste like?
Heart
The
is
elk
good.
heart. Yeah.
Yeah, heart, honestly, like, heart tastes like meat. That's what it tastes like. If anything, it probably just tastes like a little bit, and this is not going to sound the most appetizing, but it's not like what you think. Maybe just a little bit more bloody meat. So like that little bit of ironiness, but not overpowering.
Mhm.
Um, and you're going to think it's kind of tough when you first bite into it, but it's not chewy. Like, it's not like a stringy, um, it's not like a stringy meat. It's not anything like that. It's almost like a hard tofu because there's no strings to it. So like, when you bite into it, it is firm, but there's no chewiness to it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And it's
And
good.
then yeah, I mean, all those sound good. It's cool that you figure you know it is you just find a way to cook something, you know, like that's the fun part about it. What
Yeah.
about venison? Do you have a favorite way to cook it? I know a lot of people want to ask you what your favorite way to have venison.
Yeah. I'll give, just to touch on some of the stuff we are just talking about. We just cooked up some blacktail, uh, testicles. We did some beer battered buck nuts. And I will tell you, like, if you're looking at the nut, it's like shaped like a nuts. It's shaped like your nut, and like, so
Okay.
that I cut them and cut them into slices, and then beer battered it, and then we fried it up. And the ends are a little crunchy and chewy. I will tell you that. It's not till you get more towards the center where you get like more of like the healthy thick part of the nut. It's like it's not as it's more like it's kind of like calamari almost, you know. It's like not,
Okay.
but yeah, maybe next time cut the ends off, kind of like a carrot, and get rid of those, and then
Yeah.
like just cook that juicy thick inside of that nut. But those are pretty good. Venison, just like so many ways to cook it, and honestly, like the carnitas is the best way that I've been making it lately. Is because you can just get a big roast, right? Like just grab a big chunk of that stuff, and you don't have to sit there and clean out all that cartilage, especially the shoulders. Like deboning shoulders is one of the lamest things to do because if you're trying to keep like these big nice muscles groups, and then you're carving this thing off this shoulder blade, and that shoulder blade's got these weird like little pockets in it. You're like carving stuff off. It's so much easier to throw that whole shoulder into the slow cooker and just let it do its thing, and then pull that shoulder blade out after.
Yeah.
So throw that whole shoulder in there, and it's a lot of like cumin, paprika, a lot of lime, salt, pepper, always salt, pepper. Man, it kind of put me on the spot. I gotta like think about what's in that baby. I think there's some chili powder in there. The big key is the cumin and the lime. Like definitely got to get enough of that in there. I think there's some oregano. Maybe not oregano. Kind of drawing a blank, but like the lime really is key, and just slow cook it. I could probably look in some of my notes for what the
Yeah.
carnitas recipe
We
is,
can
but we
always
can,
put that in the show notes later. But
yeah, for
yeah,
sure.
so
So
basically you're saying you braise it and slow cook it
yeah,
and
yeah, always, yeah, brown that baby up,
yeah.
sizzle that baby to get that crust, because that slow cooker is never going to give you that crust, right? So then
Right.
I turn that baby on hot, and then start sizzling that thing, sear that baby all up, toss it in there. I think I cook onions and throw them in there too. And then, yeah, season it all up. Boom, like at least 6 hours. 6 hours in the slow cooker. And then you can decide what you want to do with it from there. The tacos, burritos are always good, but the simple one I love is making carnitas, quesadillas, just
Mm.
because it's like, and two, there's a lot of people who don't want to eat wild game, and once you make those tacos and stuff, they'll never know, no clue. I actually did that to somebody who's super picky. My friend who's just like won't, he's just a worse person to go to a restaurant with, and he wants to know what everything is, and I told him it was beef, and I waited till it was done. I was like, how was those? How was that moose quesadilla? He's like, what? I was like, yeah, dude, that's moose right there. But after he ate it, he had no problem with it. But yeah, quesadillas are good, just like that. It's got such good flavor in there. So
Yeah.
that's been my favorite way, and it's simple. Like there's a lot of fancy ways we can cook stuff, but I'm real big fan of just that simple and homey,
Mhm.
those good meals.
Yeah. Have you had the flip flop style too with the
Yeah.
hindquarters? Yeah.
hmm
With Andy.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Such a fun way to do it, and it's cool because you're always getting that crisp. You're always getting that char on it.
And then you get that kind of raw underneath, kind of that ahi feel because it's fresh. Like it's just
Yeah.
that's the first time that piece of meat's seen air. So like that raw
hmm
meat underneath is just like, oh, so good. And that
That's
was the
like
first
medium rare.
time I had access having
Yeah.
it that way. I had blacktail first, so they had me at blacktail, kind of, kind of like tri-tip texture as far
hmm
as like how tough it is, and they're like, okay, we're gonna give you access now. And I was like, whoa, like, I mean, that's the best meat I've ever, as far as wild meat goes, that's the best I've ever had. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sure you've got
Anybody.
access
Yeah.
to that. Yeah.
Yeah. Anybody listening, access deer is the best wild meat you can get. I don't
Yeah.
care. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of meats that I haven't tried, but I know people have tried them, and all I know is you can't beat axis deer.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Um, there's some other fun stuff that you've been up to. Of course, there's tons of recipes, but you were making knives for a little bit. Are you still doing that?
Yeah, I busted out the forge not too long ago and just pounded one. I need to finish it, but it's very time consuming.
Yeah.
It like one knife will take me straight. Like I count on 2 days to make one knife. So anybody who's out there making knives, and I got lots of friends who are just amazing blacksmiths, they got it a little bit more down, but don't ever discredit how long and many hours it takes for those guys to make those knives. And I
Hmm.
see some of them, and to go back to like the coffee thing, dude, some of these guys are selling those knives for like $300. Trust me, that knife is worth every bit of that.
Yeah.
The amount of hours that go into making those things, or $500, whatever. So I love it. It's funny because for me, I'm very functional, and I see a lot of these guys making these big, giant, badass looking freaking Rambo, like kukri knives,
Crazy.
and
Yeah.
they look sick. Like, yeah, but then like if I made that, it'd never see the light of day. I'd like whip it out around my friends, be like, "That's a knife."
Yeah.
But then I'm not going to use the thing. So first knife I ever made was like this little tiny hunting knife, and my friend Neil, who taught me how to make knives, he was like, "That's the tiniest knife I've ever seen anybody make in here." And I was like, "This is all I need, dude," because I just needed something to clean animals.
That's Neil Kamimura, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And then later it wasn't, I didn't even make 10 knives yet. And I was like, I want to make a chef knife. And that's something that usually people wait to make. And there's a lot of skills that go into making it. But I was just like, nah, dude, like that's 90% of the knives that I use. It's like, I want to make my own chef knife. So I just pounded that thing super flat and probably messed up the geometry on it, and then ended up just sanding it on my floor sander. I have a floor sander with like a
Yeah.
3-inch wide blade on it, or a belt. So I flipped that upside down in between my legs, in between my thighs, and pinched it. So it was upside down, then just sat there and grinded it. And the big part of the science behind blacksmithing for me, the hard part is the quenching it, because you got to get it the right temperature, and you got to get the whole blade that temperature, and especially when it's different thicknesses, especially towards the tip is way thinner, so it gets hotter quicker. So you got to get that baby all the right temperature without just cooking out all the carbon, and then quenching it, and then going through the process of basically curing that metal back to where it's flexible and flimsy, but it's not going to bend and it's not going to snap. So there's like a fine line. But I mean, I beat the crap out of my chef knife. It's probably not made perfectly, but um, I love that thing. And yeah, blacksmithing is just another art that's just so fun to go through the whole process. And knowing I was coming on here too, I just wanted to touch on how much fun of an art cooking is. Like, and I don't have that fear of like messing up, so I just like can just throw stuff together. And I've definitely made some meals that aren't the greatest, but I love it, dude. I love the creativity that can go into it, and just looking at one. Let's say you got a piece of meat, and you're just like, "Hey, what am I going to do with this thing?" And it's just such a cool process and such a fun art to do.
I agree with you easily 100%. I do that, try to deal with that every week, like trying to figure out stuff. Or I've been making some recipes for Firecracker Farm. We gotta get you some hot salt, but the hot salt, so he
Yeah,
takes hot peppers and infuses it into salt, and it's great on all kinds of stuff. And
awesome.
yeah, like taking something, you're like, oh, what am I gonna do with this like top round? It's not like the best meat in the world cut wise, but I was like, you know what? If you defrost it a little and then you can slice it super thin, and then I made like some Mongolian beef with it, and
Yeah,
like that works because you get it tenderized, you marinate it. You got to get a little bit of baking soda to help. It helps tenderize it, and then you marinate it in your sauces and garlic and ginger, and then then you're able to saute it in a wok and it gets soft, and then you just don't overcook it, and then good to go over some steamed rice, man. That's it.
Yeah, so
Onions,
good.
double onions sometimes, green onions and regular white onions, and then it's good. Yeah,
Yeah.
I we have that same, we're on that same wavelength, because it's just um not only just creating, but like it's, if especially if it's for your wife or your kids or friends coming over, you're like, oh, what, maybe I'll take it a step further, like finding something new that you never tried before. Like I've been doing the cilantro yogurt sauce. It's kind of like, there's all these different sauces for stuff. And I was like, oh,
Yeah.
let's just do Greek yogurt, lime, full head of cilantro, full bunch, cumin, pepper, and some salt, and whatever else you want in there. And then just you
Hmm.
burr that thing up. And there's your sauce for chicken or steak or veggies. You end up throwing it on everything. You can make a flatbread with it.
Yeah.
You could do it over rice. You could do it nothing, if you're not eating carbs, whatever, you do it over meat. And yeah, so it's been a lot of fun. Um,
Yeah. I will say, like, to touch on that, um, anybody who is listening to this maybe think about like wild game. You think of meat, and if you just want to straight up compare them, you're cooking just like a salted, salt and peppered meat. Wild game is not like a ribeye. You're not just going to cook up a nice fatty ribeye with salt, pepper. You can get away with the loins on deer and stuff, and there's some parts in the back legs you can get away with doing that, but for the most part, you can't just throw it on the grill. You either pellet smoke it, or you can sear it in a cast iron and throw it in the oven, and then salt, pepper. You can cut that, and then you can eat it kind of like steaks, like that. But if you think about your favorite meals, like a lot of people like tacos or burgers or something fancier than that. There's a lot that goes into it. You're not just eating just the meat plain, right? So like that's what I say. Like use a lot of your wild games is you got to get fancy with it, and it's not even fancy. It's just like these normal meals. You're just replacing beef or chicken with the wild game, but you're not just leaving it big old chunk of meat right there that you're chewing on. You're cutting it up. You're shredding it. You're making these sauces. The sauces, like you said, are a big part of it. Make some chimichurri sauce, or make some of
yep.
that sauce you were just talking about. Or when you make the tacos, make a good pico de gallo. Make something to go over the top of it. Just it doesn't have to be by itself, and then you're not going to get so turned away from it, because it's a natural tasting meat. So to say that it's like gamey is not the right word, but I get what people say by that. But you just got to learn how to eat it, and not just eat the big old chunk of meat by itself and be like, oh, this thing tastes weird,
Yeah, and I think understanding, like you were talking about, understanding that it doesn't have the marbling of a ribeye or a fattier piece of meat. So like you can't cook it as long if you're going to cook it, pretty hot and fast, right? Like you can't do it like that, like a steak. You either have to slow cook it or you slice it thin, and yeah, work it that
Yeah.
way. And that way you get the outcome you're kind of expecting, rather than
Mm-hmm.
going, oh, I overcooked it and it's tough and I don't want to eat that ever again. It's like, no, kind of kind of messed it up a little, and then you ruined it for yourself almost sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's definitely harder to cook straight up.
Yeah. Yeah,
You
for
just
sure.
gotta learn.
Yeah. And then getting into, I appreciate your time getting
Yeah.
to some of the funner stuff. Is like, a lot of people ask about gear. I know there's a ton of gear behind you, but you even talked to me about Montana Knife Company's boning knife, which is
Mm-hmm.
is killer. Josh is making obviously a ton of awesome knives. What are some of your favorite tools that make your day kind of easier on a daily basis? I know there's a lot of them, but just pick a couple out, and the people would be like, oh, I think I want to get something like that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's a mad assortment of knives you can get from Montana Knife Company. And if I had to narrow that one down, there's the Blackfoot which
Mm.
is right here. This is the knife I use for pretty much, I mean, I've used all of them, but that's like the simplest one for cleaning animals. Cleaned everything from like a moose to a pig with it. So there's a bunch of other ones, but then the chef knives are sick, and then the fillet knives are sick. But that boning knife, that short boning knife, I kind of love that thing. Um, there's two of them. There's like I forget what they call the other one, but basically there's the shorter one. That's those two knives are pretty much money from Montana Knife Company, and then just other gear, I guess, like some, the pellets, get like a pellet smoker is a cool one to be able to cook since we're kind of on that theme.
Yeah.
I got a Traeger, and I have a Camp Chef as well. I use both. But yeah, the pellet grills are awesome. They're make cooking wild game way simpler. And then a good slow cooker. Um, when we bought our appliances, we got a slow cooker with it, so we have that one. But there's a ton of them, and honestly, the Instapot, I
Yeah.
don't have one, but I've heard great things. I have so many people are like, "Oh, just Instapot that thing." So
I have
things like
one.
that.
Yeah.
A pressure cooker, like I don't know if is that Instapot is kind of a pressure cooker, dude.
Yeah, it actually does both. So
Okay,
that's why like it's been so successful. So yeah, you can lock it down, seal it, and pressure cook on high, or you can go low. So
yeah.
yeah, those things are awesome for sure.
So one of the things that we have, and my wife is Cuban, and she's an amazing chef herself. I just try to keep up with her, but we have a pressure cooker, like just a normal lock the lid, pressure cooker.
Yep.
And that's a key piece because a lot of my life, I'm kind of busy. I don't have all day to spend cooking in the kitchen sometimes. So it's like, oh, I forgot to make dinner. Jump in here real quick, cut up all this meat chunks, sear it, cut up some onions, throw some garlic in there, broth, and then cut up whatever veggies I got, carrots, you know, whatever, toss all those in and make like a stew or something. But that baby's done. You can pressure cook the meat first and then throw all the stuff in after. But something that I would normally slow cook for 6 to 8 hours, you're pressure cooked in an hour, 45 minutes to an hour.
Mhm.
That baby's done. So that's been a nice key piece of gear. Um,
Yeah, for sure.
and then I don't know, some of the other gear to go get food, like get yourself a bow, get yourself a rifle, spear gun, mask, snorkel. All the spear and stuff I get is from Rife. Like their spear guns are so rad and stuff. But just go out and find a place to get some wild game. That's the honestly, I wouldn't say the best part. It's just a part of it, but you don't want to miss out on that part.
Yeah. What do we'll get into starting to close this out. Is like,
Yeah.
what do you tell someone because of all your skill sets? What do you tell someone besides, just starting? Like, what do you tell them how to get into a hunt? Like, their first hunt. It's always
Yeah.
a big step.
Yeah. So it is funny, right? Because it's just like, dude, you just got to start. But I would say the best thing to do um, would be to find somebody who hunts, who's like going to offer you an opportunity to go with them, and don't pass that up. So find somebody who hunts. Make sure you're not a nuisance. So like they're not like, dude, I don't want to bring this guy out in the field. Like be willing to learn, but you're going to want to be quiet and learn. You're going to speak very softly when you're out there. Don't ever raise your voice and try to walk right behind them. Give them enough room where you're not tripping over their boots in front of you, but you're pretty much staying right with them and emulating whatever they do in front of you. But find that person who can be a mentor for you and just tag along on their hunt. Like you don't need to be the first one, go out and them teaching you how to shoot something. You need to watch somebody else do it first. And then maybe after you help them get their animal, especially if you're hunting something bigger, you can help clean that animal because it's always nice to have an extra hand. Here, hold this leg. Okay, I'll hold this leg. And then watch them cut the hide off. and you're pulling, certain ways you pull it, it'll make it easier for them. So you're being an asset to them. Um, and then you pack it out there. You already, like, you have your foot in the door. You got to see the whole process. Now you could go do it on your own if you want, but hopefully that person will be like, okay, let's, let's go get you an animal now. So then you'd go down that whole process. And if they have done it, they know all the steps on what it takes for you to do it. So, like, okay, they shot one. Cool. What do I need? I need a rifle that looks like theirs or borrow theirs. And I need to be able to shoot like they shoot. And then I can go do it. So really, that's the best step, is finding somebody else. I'll tell you, that's not the way I learned. I just got a bow, started slinging arrows, and like had to go out and learn it myself. That's another option if you have that motivation, but you got to have that motivation to be like, I'm going to do this. And no matter what, I'm going to learn how to shoot this bow, and I'm going to go out there and I'm going to struggle, and I'm going to go find an animal if it takes me, a week, but you got to set aside that time, but you got to be committed for sure.
100%. I got two more really good questions.
Yeah.
One, I'm sure you've been asked, or both of these have probably been asked many times.
No
One
problem.
is, why are you called the Boarman?
Yeah.
And then obviously the second part of that is, what gives you that drive, like to go out and do something that you've never done before. And you're like, I'm just going to go balls to the wall and learn it and get good at it. Those are my two questions you've probably been asked before, for sure.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, the Boarman is funny. My brother-in-law calls me Boarman, and that nickname stuck. So basically, when he was a little kid, his cousins would tell him these campfire stories of this mythical creature that was half boar, half man, that would like come out of and only be out at night, and like come out of the woods, and just like this, those campfire stories. So I I hunt a lot of pigs, and I've had a couple crazy run-ins with them. I've had to shoot some that were charging straight at me, and just had to just stand there and man up and make sure I make the shot and put it right between their eyes. And I've also, had to wrangle them and wrestle them to the ground. So me and boars have like a healthy relationship with each other. And there's been times where it's like, I mean, it sounds dramatic, but it's like, it's me or him, and they can be brutal. They're just brutal animals. So that's where the nickname Boarman came from. And it was just a joking nickname that he gave me, but then it turned into more of that because we work out together. He comes and work out, and we'd always just make funny like animal noises to each other, like we're a couple boars, getting ready to work out, and like, like our tusks, like getting ready to sharpen our tusks. And so it just turned into something pretty playful, which is where like the brand side of it came from, of making shirts and stuff, because it's like this playful character that you could, dive into a little bit. And I just like boars. Boars are gnarly. They're just like gnarly animals. So to try to emulate them, and it just goes further into tapping into our wild side, because all of us have that animal in us and that wild side in us that we don't really let out. We're so dove into modern world where we're, sleeping in nice beds, and just everything's so easy now. So it's nice to dig into that like grit of just being a wild man. And that's kind of what Boarman is. And then, yeah, the drive, it's funny. I have that drive in me to just do the wild things that I do. It's hard to explain, but it's a deep burning passion in me to do those things and to be good at them. And it's something that I can't explain. I just wake up with, and it's not always there. And sometimes I have to get that passion and that dream and then hold on to that, because I don't have the time or the money to make those things happen. and I try not to let the good ones that I'm very passionate about slip away, but I wait for the right time to attack them. And then when that opportunity is there, I make sure that I pounce on it. And I sadly, like, it can be a little bit like a drug addict sometimes, because you're giving up a lot, you sacrifice a lot for those things. Um, and some of those things you kind of have to pounce on when the time is there, and you're giving up, hey, you were supposed to be at this other thing, or with family or whatnot. So you got to make sure that, for me, you're able to pounce on those things when they come by doing all the things that you needed to do beforehand, which I failed at a lot. But that, as far as having the drive to do all those things, it's just there's no real explanation for me. It just is in me to be like that.
Awesome. I'll leave you with anything you want to say, advice, projects, promotions you got coming up. The floor is yours. And Danny, again, appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, I appreciate you, Dave. I appreciate you having me on, for sure. Love what you got going on. The food part is such a connector for us, and more people should cook for their friends and family. That's what I will say. Especially if you can go get the meat and stuff yourself. But if you can't, that's not a big deal. But it's a lot of work cooking, and it's a lot of responsibility. You're making food that you hope tastes good, but everybody should do it. Everybody should host a night of dinner with friends or family, and get don't be an idiot and get that out of your head that, like, oh, it's not going to taste good, or, oh, I don't want to clean up after. Just got to do it. Got to do it. And it's going to give you the feeling, it's going to give you that sense of purpose on, like, why you're here too. And it's not just like a woman's place in the kitchen. We got to get in there too. And us as men, like, a lot of men don't cook, but it's like, dude, it's such a fun way to express yourself, even if it's something simple. So yeah, that's what I'll kind of like. I'd love to see other people get in the kitchen more, and I know you too, Dave. You'd love to see more people get after it. And
yeah, I'm always trying to, like, think of ways to teach people, or I was thinking of maybe even starting something where we could dive into a little community where, like, oh, here's where you can ask all your questions, fire away, like going through the day to day. Cause some people don't want to go, like, oh, what do I get at the store? And it's like, well, this is what you need. And then this is how you put it all together. But it's
yeah,
for sure. Everyone can dive into your skill set and see you on Instagram at Danny Bolton. TheDannyBolton.com is your website. Do you have any
yeah.
other projects and stuff you got coming up you're working
We
on?
started a YouTube,
Yes, Boarman TV. That's right.
Boarman TV. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you go on there now, it's pretty raw. I'm trying to fit it in with my life. And so a lot of it is like, okay, I'm going to bust this out. I'm going to film it on my GoPro, my phone, and throw a quick edit on it. But I kind of forcing myself just to get them out and not spend a bunch of time editing, because I can get caught in that process of thinking it's not perfect. So I'm like just getting them out. But there is some cool stuff on there, and we will definitely be diving deeper into recipes on there, which is going to be a cool way, like you said, to kind of try show people how easy things can be. And some of the things we talked about on this, maybe be able to visually just watch, like, oh, that's how you make carpaccio, or that's how you make just a quick pressure cooked stew. So eventually we will definitely dive more into that. I think I actually made, I made just a salted pork. It's funny because I made like that carnitas that I was talking about.
Yeah.
But I was in such a rush to finish it and make it, and didn't put any effort into filming it. And that's how it goes sometimes, right? Like, you got to purposely, like, if someone's making content, dude, that stuff takes time.
It does.
For me, I was like whipping that shit out, and I was like, oh, I should have filmed that. That would have been a good one, but I was too busy just doing it. So, but yeah, the YouTube is going to be fun. It's hard keeping up with that. And like this podcast, I'm proud of you for keeping up with that. I don't know if people know, that listen to this podcast. I don't know how many of them actually have podcasts themselves, but for you to have this and, hound people like me, like, dude, are we going to, cause we've been talking for a while. It's like, frick, dude, are we finally
Years.
going to set
It's
up a date,
years. Yeah.
and it's hard. That's hard being that guy. So,
Yeah.
I'm proud of
I
you for
appreciate
doing
it.
that. And people are just, getting this stuff for free. You sissies out there, like, come on, show some love for Dave over here. Rick can give him some love. He's putting in
Hey,
hard work.
and you're gonna be episode 50, so you're 50 right
Heck
here.
yeah.
So epic
Hey,
episode.
50th state, Hawaii, right there.
There you
50.
go. Maybe that was
It was meant to
meant
be.
to be. And then I'll throw this out there. I've met Neil Kamimura at Forge the Table in Sacramento. Probably doesn't remember me that well, but I shout out to him. But like one day, I'd love to come out and see you guys in Hawaii, cook with you, podcasts, maybe make a knife, go hunt or something. So I would love to put that out there as well.
Yeah, for sure.
And come see
That'd
you
be
guys.
awesome.
So do that in person, because this is great to be able to give a conversation and share with everyone your story. But man, I want to put it down on the ground too. So
For
thank you,
sure.
Danny. We'll close it out. Appreciate you guys, everybody. Thanks for listening. We're out of here.
Yeah. Thanks, Dave.